Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. Welcome to week 3 of Denver Women's Sports Collective, Career Advancement, the before, during, and after progression in sports events and marketing. I am your host, Ryan Guy. A little bit about myself. I was actually born and raised in South Jersey. I grew up playing travel softball, soccer, and nationally competing in Taekwondo. At 18, I moved to Alabama, where I obtained my bachelor's degree in sports broadcast journalism in Spanish. I worked as a sports reporter for the University of South Alabama. I was the in-game promotions host for men and women's basketball and the softball sideline reporter for Jag Nation TV. I actually just moved to Colorado at the end of 2019, and currently I'm working as an elementary school teacher, and I am also the co-founder and host of the DWSC podcast that will premiere in March of 2021. But enough about me. As for our guest speakers joining us today for our discussion, we have Kelsey Bannister, Vice President of Premium Client Services for Kroenke Sports and Entertainment. Kelsey joined Kroenke Sport and Entertainment in October of 2015 as the Director of Membership Services for the Denver Nuggets. In 2019, Kelsey was promoted to Vice President of Premium Client Services, where she is currently responsible for overseeing all premium spaces and clients at both Ball Arena and Dick's Sporting Goods Park, specifically for the Denver Nuggets, the Colorado Avalanche, Colorado Rapids, Colorado Mammoth, and all third-party events and concerts. Kelsey, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
And next up, we have Christine Spiller. She is currently the Senior Director of Event Services at Climate Pledge Arena, scheduled to open fall of 2021, where she oversees event management and guest services for the NHL's 32nd expansion team, the Seattle Kraken, the WNBA Seattle Storm, and over 90 concerts and special events annually. She joined Climate Pledge Arena in August of 2020 with more than 9 years of sports and entertainment and venue management industry experience. She most recently served as the Senior Director of Venue Operations at Pepsi Center here in Denver, Colorado, where she led the overall guest relations and experience vision and much, much more for the Colorado Avalanche and the Colorado Mammoth. Thank you so much for being here, Christine.
Thanks for having me this evening.
Absolutely. And last but certainly not least, we have Lindsay Solano, Athletic Director and Assistant Principal of 27J Schools. Lindsay previously worked as an educator for 27J Schools for 9 years before becoming the Assistant Principal and Athletic Director for Brighton High School here in Colorado. She pursued her master's degree in educational leadership at Regis University after obtaining her bachelor's degree in communications at Colorado State University. And most recently, she assisted with the opening of Riverdale Ridge High School as the Dean of Students during the 2018 and 2019 school year. Thank you, Lindsay, for being here. Excited to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. And today we will also get to hear some announcements throughout our discussion from our DWSC board members, so stay tuned for those. This week, we are going to focus on career changes, how to bring your experience to the interview table, and how to negotiate your salary. So without further ado, I would like to start our discussion by talking about how many people have lost their jobs this year. A lot of people have had to switch up their career paths in light of what has transpired in 2020. Of course, COVID, we got to talk about it. So many people are going through changes in their career, and I know a lot of our panelists have similar experiences. Christine, I know we chatted about how you had a major career change and how difficult that situation was for you. Could you explain a little bit about how you came to that decision?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I started with Climate Pledge Arena in August, so still relatively new position actually. But yeah, I mean, I think, there were all sorts of tough things that were going on. I mean, we were in the middle of a pandemic. People were losing their jobs, people were getting furloughed. And, fortunately for those of us who were at Pepsi Center, we still all had jobs. And I was going to be leaving a team that I was really excited about. We had been short staffed for about 2 years, and we just finished building our team out. We were just getting, going on some of our major initiatives for training. And we were really excited about what was coming up, and obviously not knowing the future with being in the pandemic was tough to begin with. But it was a tough decision to leave because, the people that I was working with were all excited to be there as well. And you never want to leave a team that, you're excited to lead and you're excited to work with. But at the end of the day, Climate Pledge Arena it's a brand new arena. So other than the roof, which you can see behind me, which is the old roof from the old Key Arena, everything's going to be new beneath it. And then also, in conjunction with that, a brand new NHL team. And so at the end of the day, for me, it was something I couldn't refuse. To build something from the ground up. I mean, policies and procedures, they haven't been written. We get to create it all. And I have to say, it's daunting because every day I wake up and, there's a new task ahead. And sometimes I feel like we're getting a lot accomplished and we're going to be ready for opening next fall. And then other days I get done with my work day and I'm like, oh my God, we have so much work ahead of us. And so, I think for me, at the end of the day, I didn't want to have any regrets. And I think when I really thought about, what my life would look like if I stayed in the position that I was in versus taking a new opportunity, I would have always wondered what if. And I couldn't let myself wonder what if for the rest of my life. And so for me, I had to take this opportunity, even though it was during a pandemic. I was onboarded via Zoom. I have met my boss 3 times in person. I haven't met most of my team in person yet. And believe it or not, the one thing that you never figure out on Zoom is how tall somebody is. And the couple of people that I have met, it's always a shock to me how tall people are or short they are. But I think for me, I would have been kicking myself to not take this opportunity. And so at the end of the day, I did what was best for me. And, now that I'm here and I'm 4 months in, I haven't regretted that decision once.
Awesome. I think that's really important, especially in this year of constant changes that we have. That can be very daunting, and you took that leap of faith, and it seems to be working out really well for you. So that's very exciting and super positive. I love to bring out all the positives that we can of this year. Kelsey, I know you have a similar experience going from working event operations at the Toyota Center in Houston to premium client services for the Rockets. And now you're the vice president of premium client services for Conkey Sports and Entertainment. Could you explain a little bit about your transition between fields within the sports industry and what ultimately made you climb that ladder within the sales industry as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, Christine, we miss you at KSE. Haven't seen anyone in person in a long time either, so it's nice to see some familiar faces. A lot of my transition, although it was all in the sports industry, anytime you move from company to company, or even within a department or outside of a department, you're going to have those changes that are unknown and you have to figure out as you go. So some of the big things that worked for me, I think the first internship I had a wonderful boss. And she instilled in me how important it was to make connections within your department, but more importantly, outside your department. So through that, I really connected with people when I started in Houston, across every department and every team. Through that, it's really how I started networking and building genuine relationships. And that helped me in my transition even to Denver, within Houston as well. And then also ultimately to my current position. So I'm going to give some mom advice. I'm not a mom, I'm a dog mom, but as I call it, mom advice. I think the one thing that's helped me is being okay with not knowing everything. We get so wrapped up in our own egos thinking, I have to know everything. I have to be an expert. But that's why you hire people that are smarter than you, and you surround yourself with people that will challenge you. Those are some of the big things I've learned as I've moved throughout my career. That's helped me kind of go up that ladder and really feel confident as a team and how to move the company forward. The other thing too is don't get so caught up on what everyone else around you is doing. Stay true to who you are. And that's something as you move along in your career, and especially up, you start realizing people get to different positions for different reasons. But as long as you can stay true to who you are, and that goes through the interview process, that goes through interactions with clients, that goes through interactions with employees. Just make sure you are that person that you say you are, because at the end of the day, you want to go to bed at night knowing I did the best I could the right way. Even if other people are getting promoted before you, hold tight, make sure you're doing what's right for you. And that's helped me a lot through my career as well.
Absolutely. I think staying true to who you are is extremely important as you develop your career and go throughout your career path. So I think that's a very important piece of advice, Kelsey. Thank you for that. And Lindsay, we talked a little bit about this. How do you quote unquote try on a career before taking the leap? There are a lot of career changes, like I said, this year. So I know you personally became an athletic director and assistant principal after being a teacher. So could you explain that process for yourself?
Yeah, and even further back, funny enough, I was an account executive for CBS. And so I was in sales and did outdoor advertising before I even went into teaching. So I think part of it is that idea of when you are passionate about something, it's just, kind of continuing with that desire to learn and be inquisitive and explore things. I've always had a huge passion for sports. It obviously started as an athlete when I was younger. When I got to CSU, I was very passionate about collegiate sports, worked with CSU's women's basketball team, but I got an internship with them because I asked questions and I offered to help. I would stay after late and talk to coaches and figure out what they were, what projects they were working on, things that they enjoyed about it. So I just kind of got to know different roles, positions, things that were out there, with the hope that, the more I learn, the more I might kind of figure out what is a fit for me. And I've kind of just taken that on with all aspects of every career I've ever had. Funny enough, I think after, you follow the path and that sort of thing, it's brought me back to sports, which is funny. I was an English teacher, so sometimes people are like, wait, where did that come from? It's really that idea that sports has always been a huge motivator, something I've been very passionate about. It's the collaborative nature of sports. It's the camaraderie. It's the community that's built around it. And it's the experience that, you get not only through game day, but also with experiences with athletes challenging themselves to become better. And that atmosphere was something I wanted to be a part of. I got to know those that were in the position at my school and, just asked, hey, while I was coaching the dance team, I wanted to know more. I asked to attend meetings and be part of projects. It was kind of the best part of the work because I kind of got to pick and do what I wanted to because I wasn't being paid to do the job, right? So I kind of got to do the fun stuff. But the neat part is that I got all of that experience without leaving my teaching job. So I didn't have to do it for free. It just was added on work or added on hours and that sort of thing. So it was that idea that, just being inquisitive and exploring things, asking questions allowed me to kind of dabble here and there without fully committing or jumping in until I knew it was something I wanted and a position at a building I wanted to be at.
Right. I think passion and purpose definitely go hand in hand. And I think that you discovered that with just putting in that extra effort. And that's extremely important for anyone who does want to, quote unquote, try on a position and they don't necessarily have the resources to jump in to something right away. So thank you for that, Lindsay. And that will lead us to our first announcement from Cheryl Morrison, our DWSC Board Events Chair. Cheryl, you can take it away.
Hi, ladies. Thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you for our attendees for coming. I just want to remind everybody and let those who haven't heard know that we're having our Networking and Cookies event this Saturday, the 19th at 3 p.m. This is an event we're doing with the American Cancer Society, where we'll be decorating cookies and talking and just doing a bunch of networking. For those who have ordered their cookies already, they will be available to pick up tomorrow night from 5 to 7 p.m. at Empower Field at Mile High in the parking lot next to the Mile High Monument. So we hope to see you there. And then on Saturday, if you haven't heard and haven't registered already, you can register on our website under our events. Have a great night, ladies. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Cheryl. I am so excited about this event. I say this every discussion that we have. Cookies and talking and networking to other people are my forte. So I'm very excited for that event. Thank you for that announcement, Cheryl. And for this part of our discussion, I would love to hear from you ladies about how you personally brought your experience to the interview table, while especially for some of you who have had successful careers in multiple different industries. Kelsey, I will start with you on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when it comes to interviews, there's a few things that I've learned, not just from going through interviews myself, but also interviewing people. And there's a lot of funny stories we can share for another day. But some of the biggest things when bringing experiences, I would encourage everyone before you get to the interview, write out true life experiences that have happened in your career. Oftentimes when I'm interviewing or in an interview and someone asks a question like, tell me about a time you've dealt with conflict, instead of saying, oh, I handle it calmly and this is what I would do, bring up a real example with a client or an experience that happened in your career, because it's going to tell the person that you're interviewing with two things. You answer the question, but then you also already know that you know how to handle that, and we don't have to spend time training you on that. So when it comes to experiences, I highly recommend writing those out. Write down interview questions you think you'll have, and then put specific examples for each of them and bring that with you so you're prepared. The second thing I found success in, especially when I was shifting from the Rockets to the Nuggets, whenever I came to the interview, there are big projects that I had worked on and kind of was at the forefront. One of those examples was the auto renewal process back in the day before it was known in the NBA or across any leagues of what auto renewal was. So being able to launch that in Houston, I actually put together a business plan that I bound and had everything ready to go in my interview. I kept it in my back pocket. I didn't just throw it out there to show everyone, but I was ready and prepared. So the minute that someone asked me about that, I had a plan in place that I could easily bring and implement. So it's not just being prepared with questions, it's being prepared with those examples and being prepared with true plans that you have that you can help implement whenever you get to the next step. Equally as important, I think we forget that when you're on an interview, it's important for you to interview the company that you're looking at. Not every fit is perfect, and you have to make sure that you're asking questions to that company and it's a good fit for you as a person and not just the other way around. So have those questions prepared ahead of time. It's okay to reference notes in an interview. I'd rather see someone prepared than stumbling, trying to figure out, oh, I think I have a question, I can't remember it. So don't be afraid to be prepared and bring notes and bring those experiences from the past, and that's going to help you a lot in that process.
I think bringing those experiences, like you said, is extremely important. I know personally when I've had interviews, I have seen them become very successful because I was vulnerable with the answers that I gave and gave real life examples to them. So I think that's extremely valuable piece of information. So thank you, Kelsey. And Lindsay, I'd love to hear from you next for this part of the discussion. We're just talking about the interview table and how you bring your experience to those discussions.
Yeah, and obviously, like I think what's difficult is sometimes you don't necessarily bring kind of the experience in terms of the years to the table, and so I think people sometimes doubt themselves. Do I really have what they need in terms of, have I had this role before, or how long have I been doing this? Who am I going up against? And I think at the end of the day, you have to be authentic. Kind of like Kelsey was saying, you can only be you in an interview. And so if anything, if it doesn't work out, then it's that idea that you're helping yourself, because you don't want to, end up in a situation where perhaps it's not a good fit because they saw something, or, you perhaps thought it was going to be a situation that it's not. So be authentically you, and, look for that right match. I think the other piece that I would say is focus on function, right? And where that starts off and where I notice it the most is in resumes. I think sometimes depends on how people have been taught, but a lot of people do chronological resumes. And a lot of times, especially with automated systems, that stuff is already in a system where you've outlined, where you've worked in the past 5 to 10 years. I would say in a resume, focus on functions. Look at the job description and pull out key specific words that you see them using. I pull out words like collaboration, finance, fiscal management, things like that, where then I can go, you know what, I might not have done this job, but here's the way that I have addressed these, kinds of experiences in my past. And that way you're speaking to the fact that I don't want you to focus on the fact that I haven't had this job very much. I want you to focus on the fact that these are the things that I've demonstrated in my capacity that would allow me to do this job and be a successful candidate in this position.
Right. One thing you said, I love that you mentioned being authentic. I think that really comes across on an interview table as well as being very genuine, and people see that in you. And then focus on function. I want to preach that to everyone. That's a great piece of advice. So thank you, Lindsay. And then Christine, do you have anything to add from your personal experience?
Yeah, I mean, I can't stress enough how important your preparation is. And, actually what I had thought of talking about was very similar to Kelsey, in that have examples for every single thing you bring up. Back your skills up. And, when I'm thinking and preparing for an interview, I think about the leadership qualities that they're looking for, the skill set that they're looking for. And then I try to anticipate every single question they might ask me. So anticipate, what your biggest accomplishments are, anticipate what your biggest weaknesses are coming into a role, anticipate what your biggest challenges are going to be. You cannot prepare enough. And, also it helps to find real world examples that you can use in different questions. So I would take, your top 3 real life examples and then say, okay, well, how can I change this story so that it actually fits into an accomplishment or a weakness, depending on whether they're asking one thing or the other? Because then very easily you can draw that experience back out and it's easier to remember the details. You just have to kind of shift how you're presenting it. But then I always try to bring to the table too, how the skills are that I've achieved and how they're translatable to different industries. So for example, every time that I have applied for either an event management position or some position that has a piece of event management in it, I talk about project management, and project management translates across so many different industries. Same thing with, guest services and guest relations. It's all about building relationships, but so is leadership, right? It's all about building relationships with internal departments. And you just have to be able to, again, kind of transition which relationships you're talking about, depending on which job you're applying for and which question you're answering. And then I can't stress enough either, everything is in the details. And, somebody calling somebody by the wrong name or calling the company by the wrong name, which, believe it, has happened for me as the hiring manager. I've heard it multiple times. Those are really quick ways to eliminate yourself from the candidacy process. And you might think, oh, well, I just goofed on his name, or I called Christine Christina. Well, Christine is not very, keen to being called the wrong name, and that will ding you. So make sure you have all the details figured out. Make sure you're prepared. Ask thoughtful questions. To Kelsey's point, make sure you're always asking questions afterwards, even if you don't get to all of them. A lot of times I have 15 more questions than I even had asked or even had time to ask, because you never want to run out of things to ask. And then the last piece of advice I'd give is just make sure you do that follow through too. So anytime that you've interviewed anybody, even if you don't have, if they're not working in the office, make sure you get their email address and you can just send them a quick note. I don't think it needs to be a handwritten card anymore these days, but just something quick, thanking them for their time and letting them know you're excited about the position, I think it goes a long way.
I vouch for you when you say that you do not like to be called by the wrong name. With my name, it happens all of the time. People mistake me for the wrong gender as well, so very frequently. So I understand. Definitely do your research, be prepared beforehand. Another thing that you said was be prepared for them to ask what your biggest weakness is as well. And I think a lot of the times we see people who are like, oh, I work too hard, that's my biggest weakness. No, find something that really is your biggest weakness. Like, you procrastinate, be honest, like Lindsay said, be genuine, and Kelsey also said, just be yourself, be true to yourself. And I think that's all really great advice that everyone can utilize when they're being interviewed. So thank you for all of that information. And as for our audience members, if you have any questions for our panelists, please ask your questions in our Q&A box. It's at the bottom of the screen. And that is now time for our announcement from Allison Thomas, our DWSC board, one of our board members. Allison Thomas, take it away.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Quick cookie pickup date change. It is actually this Thursday, December 17th, 5 to 7. So go ahead and mark that down. But while you guys are typing in some of your last minute questions for everyone, don't forget that DWSC is posting content on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Yes, we're doing all 4. So if you're not following one of those, go ahead and check it out after this. I encourage you guys to give us a follow. But that's really all I have for tonight. Ryan, I'll give it right back over to you.
Thank you, Allison, for that announcement and that clarification on our cookie event. We don't want anyone missing that event. I definitely am not going to miss it. So up next, we are going to get some insight from all of our panelists about negotiating a salary. This is a very tough thing for me personally to bring up in an interview process, to talk with my higher ups. So I am very interested to see what you all say. This could be anywhere from your personal experience with negotiating your salary to your experience negotiating a salary with someone you're hiring. So Lindsay, could we hear from you first?
So in my field, it's a little bit different. So, and just for the purpose of anyone that is curious, I think that it's important to kind of acknowledge there isn't much salary negotiation when it comes to education. So as far as how ours works, it's partially based off of a salary scale. So the idea is that it goes based off of your years of education as well as experience. So negotiations for us has to do with understanding that something going all the way back to your resume helps determine where you fall on that chart. So not selling yourself short all the way through, and making sure that you articulate your experience from the get-go. I think that's really important, and knowing what a salary schedule looks like, right? That idea that you've done the research to know, how that works in an industry. If you have the ability to negotiate, and that idea of who those appropriate people are. I know for us, many of the hiring managers don't have any of the conversations about salary. It all goes through human resources. So finding out who those people are so that you can ask those questions appropriately, and understanding that it is definitely something that is very important. So don't shy away from those conversations. Know your worth. And I would say more than anything, be okay to walk away. If it's not going to fit, then you got to be okay knowing your worth and knowing, what you bring to the table, and understanding that in many ways, you're reminding yourself what you're capable of and the work that you do, how much you bring to the table.
Right, I think that's extremely important, doing the research, absolutely, and that helps you understand your worth and your value as well. So that's great insight. Thank you, Lindsay. Christine, could you give us a little bit of insight for how you negotiate a salary, or would give advice for somebody to negotiate their salaries?
Absolutely. I think first and foremost, I'll go back to that research piece. Every company has a range that they can provide for a position. Some may have wider ranges than others. But at the end of the day, you can't just pull a number out of thin air and think that, that's going to be the right number for a job. You have to be able to back it up. So I think, first, just understanding that there is a range. And second, doing your research, know what the market rate is for that particular position that you're applying to. And if you can't find something locally that's similar, find something nationally that's similar, and then look at the cost of living compared to where you're at and figure out what that would equate to in the market that you're applying to. The other thing I'll say is, and I don't actually know what the law in Colorado is, but in Washington, a candidate, I as a hiring manager cannot ask a candidate what they're currently making. And if a candidate asks me what the range is for a position, I have to give that range to that individual. So that actually helps you knowing that, because you could go in and if somebody says, hey, what is your salary expectation for this position? You don't even have to necessarily answer that. You could turn it around and say, well, actually, I'm curious, what is the range for this position? And the hiring manager would actually have to tell you. So you actually, there's different ways that you can kind of figure out what the job pays without having to, immediately start it off at the bat or be the person that even brings it up in the first place. And same thing, I wouldn't be shy bringing up money. I mean, at the end of the day, you're getting paid for a job. It's part of it. So to Lindsay's point, don't shy away from those conversations. And, I would say if you're going through a phone screen with HR and they haven't brought it up, you might not want to bring that up the first time, but certainly in the second interview, it's absolutely okay for you to then ask what the range is, because at the end of the day, if the range isn't what you thought it was going to be and you are going to walk away, like Lindsay said, then, you lost my train of thought. Hold on. Then you're not wasting everybody's time. So, hiring managers are busy and, we want to be obviously respectful of everybody else's time as well. So it's an important topic, and it's important that it comes up probably within the first couple interviews, I would say. And then, last but not least, you'll never know, what you could receive if you don't ask for it. And don't forget too, that salary isn't just about the number attached to your salary. A package is really what you're looking for, right? So maybe there's a bonus involved, or maybe you can negotiate a bonus that's, an annual bonus, or if you hit some sort of milestones, time off can sometimes be negotiated. Sometimes it can't. And, I've even asked that question and said, okay, well, can I ask for more time off because this seems like it's very short? Worst thing they can say is no. And you're not going to get a job just because you asked for more time off in your offer. So again, I would say, shoot for the stars as far as you can always ask. Make sure you're being realistic though as well, and do your research on the back end.
Right. So doing your research, to reiterate that, I think that's extremely important as well. And then also one thing that you said that I thought was pretty interesting, you said to look up what the rates are and what the salary ranges are as well. And then if you can't find that, then nationally, that could be a source for you. I know personally applying to jobs, when I first lost my job during the beginning of this pandemic, a lot of job applications don't necessarily mention the salary range or what they expect to pay their employees. So I think that's important, doing your research. And then Kelsey, do you have anything to add to that?
I think Lindsay and Christine did a great job covering most of my points. One thing I'd like to recommend for everyone, I don't know if you guys have read the book by Chris Voss. It's called Never Split the Difference. He's an FBI negotiator, and he gives wonderful tactics that you can use. Obviously, hopefully no one has to negotiate for people being kidnapped, but what you can use in everyday life. And so he actually has a whole section on how to actually go in and negotiate salaries. And I read it too late after my last promotion, where I'm like, I wish I would have read this and took some tactics from it. But some of the stuff he brought up was never give the salary range to the person that's interviewing you first, because they know, okay, well, I'm going to come in, I deserve $100,000. Well, the company is like, well, that's great because we usually start people at 125,000. So you already put yourself in a position where in your mind, you might be getting a great raise, but you're missing out on money. So let them tell you the range first, like Christine mentioned. Another small thing he mentions, which is really interesting, is use odd numbers. So when people give ranges, they leave it at a 0 at the end. So I expect 80,000 to 100,000. It sounds like a broad range that someone just found online. Do your research, find out the actual range, but then turn it into an odd number. So 89,000 to 101,000 is what I'm expecting. There's something with the human psyche that he brings up that people think you do more research and it's a real definite number than just an even number. So highly recommend that book. Again, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. He goes through great stuff you can use in your career, especially when it comes to the point of negotiating salaries. Highly recommend reading that now. I already go back and reference it all the time. So really good information on there as well.
And we will link that book for all of our audience members that attended this this discussion. We will have a recap email sent out to everyone. So we'll have that book in our resources list. Thank you, Kelsey, for that information. Next part of our segment, we will have our audience member questions answered. We got a couple questions from them, but first up we have our January event announcement from our DWSC Board Vice President, Christina Mooney. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Hey, listen, 2020 is coming up, and do you know who you want to be? Do you have confidence issues that you're fighting with? Or can you just not get motivated to do anything? It takes me a really long time to try to get motivation to put on something other than pajamas and just get out of bed these days. And I mean, 2020, has it wrecked your self-esteem and just taken your drive? If you're anything like me, the answer is yes. Well, hey, join us for the wonderful New Year, New You event. We've invited Chris Kistner, a local life coach, to help you work through those mental limitations and set goals for 2021. We will also have fitness tips to be successful in 2021. If you're interested and you want to get more information and you want to take control back in your life, check out our social medias, sign up for the weekly newsletters, and register on DWSC.com. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of this show or this live stream. It's great.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was a lovely announcement. I am looking forward to that event. I can definitely say that I feel very similar to you after this year. So that's something that I'm really looking forward to for the new year. And without further ado, we have some questions from our audience members. So our first question, what's your advice on reaching out to people to network and ask for informational interviews? I am going to start with Lindsay. What advice do you have to reaching out to people and to network and ask for informational interviews?
This sounds crazy, but one of the very first things that I did was created a list of people. It was key players, names that people tossed around, especially in the athletic director world, sports. I was identifying key members with CHASA. I was identifying, the top 5A schools and who their athletic directors were. I was doing research and just trying to kind of figure out who those people were, so that I could kind of start to ask some questions as I, got to know people, figuring out what, associations maybe people are a part of, and what organizations people like to, it's kind of a small world, as big as it seems. I think it's every industry is that way. When you get to know one person, typically between, the next couple people, everyone knows everybody. And so just trying to kind of figure out who those people are and not being afraid to ask. I make jokes about it all the time, but it's true. People love to talk about themselves and their experiences. And so not being afraid to ask questions. How did you do this? What was the path that you took? And just not, kind of putting yourself out there. Funny enough, kind of like Christine mentioned, it is tough to take on a new job. I've done that this year in a pandemic where luckily I'm working at the school I worked at prior, but as far as athletic directors go, I've only met those in person that we've actually played. And even at that, sometimes I'm just meeting their athletic secretaries and not them. So we're all hiding behind an email. But taking the point to thank people for the time that they give you and really honoring that time that anyone takes to have conversations and that sort of thing, because you never know what kind of role they might be able to play in the future with you, and whether that's an opportunity to work with them in the future. A long time ago, I was actually an advisor for student leadership at Brighton High School, and I went to a conference that CHASA put on. At that conference, Harry Waterman at the time, who was a commissioner for CHASA, was working there, and I got to know him and his secretary really well, and really loved working with them. Did some networking while I was there with him. Fast forward, Harry actually ended up being the athletic director at Riverdale Ridge. So when I applied, I had a relationship with him already, and I was able to refer to some of the experiences he was familiar with. Fast forward even a couple of years down the road, now I'm in a situation where Harry's actually a colleague and he's actually our district athletic director, right? So it was something that I would have never felt like could have, continued along the way, ended up being a relationship with somebody who's been very beneficial and influential in my career.
Right. So I think making that networking list is extremely, extremely, extremely important. I know that's something that I've done throughout my few years within my career. That's really, really helped me with opening up new doors for myself. So I think that's a very important, insightful piece of information for our audience members. And then also not being afraid to ask. I know I struggled from this. I talked about this last week a little bit. I always feel like a burden when I ask people of things, and I've really had to learn how to adjust that mindset and realize that I'm not a burden, and this is something that I need to do to further my career. So definitely changing that mindset can be difficult, but it's something that you definitely need to do to further your career, like I said. So Kelsey, do you have any advice on reaching out to people and networking?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the big things, because when we're trying to network with people we've never met before or people in a different industry, I think the one thing to look at, especially working in customer service, we have a CRM system at work. We make sure we do 1 to 2 touch points, a month. We make sure we do unique touch points. But on a personal level, we don't do that for ourselves. So what I'd recommend doing is starting with that group that Lindsay mentioned, the people you already know, high school friends, church friends, college friends, those people that you may have lost connections with. I think the one thing the pandemic has started us realizing is a genuine check-in is totally fine. So start with the intention to really see how they're doing, and then set that reminder for a month out on your calendar. Hey, follow up with this person. I think we do such a good job at our own work, but we don't do it on a personal level. So use warm leads like this panel. Reach out to us after this. Hey, thank you for speaking. How many panels have we all been on where I've offered that? Hey, reach out, let's connect. I have one person reach out of 200 people. So just know that that's an option as you see people do presentations, especially virtually now. Start with that genuine lead. Make sure you're using those warm leads as well. And then as you also look at different people's companies, if you see anything in the news about that company, use it as a touch point. Hey, saw that you guys have signed this big deal. Congrats. It's not you asking them for anything. It's just simply staying connected. So 6 months, 10 months down the line, if there is something you need, it's much more of a genuine connection instead of getting that email that I know we all hate to get of, hey, I see you work at Kroenke. How can I get a job there? So just start with a genuine network, start with warm leads like we're doing right now, and then build that relationship over time. So when the ask is there, it's something that is not so foreign and not out of the blue.
I love that you mentioned that. It's like starting out your career with a cold call. That's definitely not necessarily how you want to do it. So those warm leads, I love that so much. So that is a great piece of advice. And as for reaching out to our panelists, we will have their LinkedIn's linked on this discussion at the end of the discussion. So like Kelsey said, reach out to our panelists. They're offering that, so definitely take advantage of that. And then Christine, do you have anything to add for that advice for reaching out to people and networking?
Sure. Yeah. I think, sports and entertainment it's a tough industry to get into. And, as most of you on this call probably already know, is that once you're in it, it's a very small industry as well. And, any connections that you make, as long as you continue to have those touch points, like Kelsey said, they should be around in order to assist you for years to come. And, don't be afraid to ever reach out to and ask for somebody to give you an informational interview either. I mean, I don't think to this day I have turned down an informational interview request. And, it's funny because I actually, when I tell people, when they're like, well, what's the biggest surprise, in this industry? And I was like, well, I didn't realize I would be doing so much like career coaching, to be honest with you. Like I have a lot of conversations with college students or people that just I had actually a conversation with an Australian event manager who reached out and he said, I'm kind of curious what working events in the US is like. And I'm like, that's awesome. I would love to talk to you because I learned from that conversation as well. So these relationships can be mutually beneficial as well. The last thing I'll say is go in with some intention of what you want to accomplish out of the conversation. So I mean, I have hopped on calls where they're like, it's the conversation doesn't flow as well. And I would like somebody to come in and say, well, how did you get to where you are today? Or how can you help me in the interview process, or tell me how you got to where you are and how networking contributed with that. I think a lot of people, they ask for the informational interview. They're like, great, I got it. And then what? So I think it's just really important that you go in guided and you know what you're seeking out of that conversation as well.
Awesome. I think that is a great insight for our viewers as well. Purpose to your networking conversations, not just gaining that contact, but having a direction that you want the conversation to go to. And I think that will overall be way more beneficial for that conversation. Another question that we have from one of our audience members that I'm very interested to hear about: what has been your biggest failure that's actually kind of turned out to be a success? Kelsey, I will start with you.
I was afraid you were going to start with me. Biggest failure that has become a success. I might need to brainstorm on this one.
I can come back to you.
I failed a few times, so I'm trying to pick my best one.
All right, I can come back to you. Christine, do you have something that comes to your mind?
Sure. This is a very tricky question though, because it's not just what is your biggest failure, but it's about how you turned it around. So remember when I told you guys to have examples that you can change your answer to? Well, I don't have that, but I did come up with an example. But no, I think for me, when I started my career, I was super adamant that I was going to be a PR manager for a ski resort. That was like who I was going to be. And I was so determined to get there. And that's part of why I moved out to Colorado and I went to go work. I applied for probably like 9 different PR coordinator positions with Vail Resorts, and I didn't get a single one of them. And, at the end of the day, I think for me, like, I was like, why can I not get this job? Like, this is all I've been wanting to do. This is my goal. And I think the reason that for me it turned into an accomplishment is because it made me change my gears. Like I was so set on what I was going to do. And, I think Kelsey talked about flexibility earlier. And I think you just have to be kind of flexible. And like, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. And that's okay. And then take that and shift gears. And for me, that shifting of gears took me to Denver and got me a job at Pepsi Center, and has, really brought me to where I am today. So, really not getting a PR coordinator job at Vail Resorts was probably one of my biggest accomplishments. So that's my tale.
That's funny. I think I can definitely say that that's happened to me before, where I've tried so hard to get one specific job and it just was not working out for me. And then found teaching and figuring out that I actually really, really enjoy that and is something that I might want to pursue. And I think a lot of us this year have come to the realization that we do have to switch gears, and that might not be necessarily a failure, but that could be very successful for us. So thanks for that, Christine. Lindsay, Kelsey, I'll give you a little bit more time to think about that. Lindsay, do you have an example that you could give us?
Oh my gosh, I feel like my career has been a giant example. So I'm going to share this funny story, and, especially for people that are pursuing those, careers in sports and entertainment marketing in general. So a long time ago, Lindsay Solano, straight out of Colorado State University, the very first place that I applied for was Kroenke Sports Entertainment. And I wanted a job with game day entertainment and promotions. And that's all I wanted to do. And that's all I had been working towards. And I didn't even get an interview. And I was, of course, like, oh my gosh, now what? What do I do? And, had a couple job offers after staying at CSU, or kind of taking the leap and going to CBS Outdoor. And for me, I knew that I had to be clear on my purpose. And my purpose at the time was that I needed to step away from the world I had kind of created in college and take my next step as an adult. And so, like I said, sports and entertainment marketing has always been something that's really been a big part of my life and something I enjoy. And now it makes me laugh now that essentially I'm doing sports and entertainment marketing at a high school. And so, kind of looking at that from a different lens, be clear about your why, be clear about what you want to do. And at the end of the day, the role or the job, the position that you are doing in some way is at least helping you build your resume functionally, right? And it's all about kind of just taking every experience that you have and figuring out how can this help move me forward. It doesn't necessarily mean a shut door. It might mean an open door. It might mean a different path. But I would say this about life, and I think the pandemic's taught us this, and that is the power of resilience. And I think it's about that idea of stay the long haul, right? Be willing to play the long game. If it means that much to you, you'll get where you need to be when you need to get there. And I think that's the thing that sometimes we all struggle with. And that's just that idea that it's not always, whether or not it's going to happen. It's, can you stay the course so that when the moment and when the opportunity is right, that you are there ready and willing to take it on.
Right. Being in there for the long haul can feel like you're failing a lot of the times, but end up turning out to be a success. And sometimes that's just what we got to do, especially with this. Our whole world is online, and a lot of people like to flex their life on social media. So it can feel like you're kind of behind the schedule, but as long as you have your purpose, you will you find your passion, you'll have your purpose. So thank you, Lindsay. All right, Kelsey, I'm interested to see, what do you have to say?
I think I'm ready. As you guys were talking, I was brainstorming on some funny ones. So I'll bring up one that happened to me in Houston. When I first started as a coordinator role for ticket sales and service, what I would do is put together all the events for season ticket members, including catering and the event invitations, making sure people got the correspondence. So my first big event, we had ownership there. It was one of the biggest ones we've ever had. And it was like week 2 on the job. So I was really prepared. So I get everything set. I get the catering set. We do a walkthrough with the VP at the time, right before ownership was about to arrive. And she walks me in there and she goes, "Why do we have chicken?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Why do we have chicken?" Well, at the time, the owner, Mr. Alexander, did not eat chicken and did not want us to serve chicken at all, even in our arena. Did not know this. So last minute scrambling, trying to figure out how we get rid of this pounds of chicken and replace it with beef. Again, it sounds like such a small thing, but what I learned from it was it really is all in the details. And that has found success in my career and learning from those mistakes. But the new me would research the owner to a T and know, all right, if the ownership's attending, I know the drink they want to have, I know the food they want to have, I know what we can't have. And at the time, really early in my career, I didn't have the bandwidth to really understand that and do that research. So Mr. Alexander is no longer the owner in Houston, but if he is and anyone works with him, do not serve chicken, word of advice. So make sure you serve beef. But that was something I remember early on that I learned from pretty quickly, of making sure to pay attention to those details.
Everyone write that down. No chicken for Mr. Alexander.
Yep.
All right, and we have one final question. I'll direct this to Christine and Kelsey. It's about relocating and what advice you could give to anyone who is applying to a job that would require them to relocate. So Christine, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, can you see yourself living in the place that you're relocating to? I think for me, making this move to Seattle, I have point blank said there are very few places that would take me to leave Colorado, and Seattle happened to be one of those in the Pacific Northwest. So know what you're getting into, so that if it does get to a point where there's a job offer, know that you'll accept it. Because I think a lot of times people who are relocating, there's always that question of, well, do they really want to live here? Or were they just kind of throwing out their name into the candidacy pool to see what would happen? The other piece of advice that I would give about relocating is it's okay to ask if there is relocation provided for the position. And again, you could probably bring that up, the second interview. You could probably even bring that up in the third interview. It all depends on, again, the company and the budget that they have. It also depends on the position you're applying for. Sometimes, it's only higher level positions. But again, it never hurts to ask. And if the answer is no, and that's a make it or break it for you, then you can withdraw from the candidacy pool at that time.
I just want you to keep reiterating, don't be afraid to ask. This one's for me personally. Don't be afraid to ask. And if there's anyone else out there like myself, then definitely do not be afraid to ask, because like Christine said, that could be a make or break for you. So Kelsey, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add that in the initial interview, show the excitement and the reason you want to move to that city. To Christine's point, sometimes you get that resume and you're like, do they actually know this is in a different place? So as the person interviewing, make sure, oh my gosh, I've loved Denver. I have friends and family here. I'm excited about the potential of living here. So the person that's interviewing you knows pretty quickly, oh, they're serious about relocating. This isn't just a one-off thing. So highly recommend being encouraging and excited about that. And then on a personal note, if you get to that next step, you get the relocation, which is a great point. Make sure you build a community and put yourself out there as well. I think the hardest part of relocating is trying to find a new community. And I've done it a few times now, and I've learned a lot from it. So sign up for those kickball leagues, sign up for some of the stuff that may not be your comfort zone. Because even after you get to the point where you get that job, building that new community of friends and family in that city is equally as important to make sure you have a good experience after the fact.
I can personally contest to building community. Like I said in the beginning, when I was introducing myself, I actually just moved to Colorado. And of course, quickly after I moved to Colorado, a global pandemic broke out. So it was quite difficult for me to meet anyone. Had no family, no friends here. So that was a little bit of an obstacle for me, but I found some people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great networking resource, especially right now. And I actually joined a softball league. So that's funny that you said that. I found a couple people who offered me a couple of jobs that I didn't necessarily qualify for, but it was nice to have that sense of community, especially during these times. So thank you for that insight, Kelsey, as well. Lindsay and Christine, thank you for all of your very insightful information. That is going to wrap up week 3 of Denver Women's Sports Collective 4-part series, Career Development, the Before, During, and After Progression in Sports, Events, and Marketing. Thank you all so much, and thank you to our guests, Kelsey Bannister, Christine Spiller, and Lindsay Solano. Come back next week, Tuesday, December 22nd, for our 4th and final discussion of the series, and we will get to hear from all of our wonderful Denver Women's Sports Collective board members. Thank you again to everyone who tuned in to week 3 of our discussion. I'm your host, Ryan Guy, and we will see you next week.